Thank you. Again, thank you to Joe
Rabbi.
Fuchs for not only the reading, but handling all parts of our Torah service here in the sanctuary. Chag Sameach to everyone. Hope that you're doing well on this first Pesach morning and that your Sidarim were meaningful last night and hopefully will be again tonight. Whether you're hosting, participating on Zoom, or as we did, both. We commented quite frequently that we felt a lot more comfortable on Zoom this year than we did this time last year, just in terms of figuring it out and executing in ways that people could actually have half a chance of seeing and hearing what was going on and to participate even from a great distance. I'd like to take a few minutes this morning to reflect on a by chance experience that I had that led me to think about an aspect of Pesach, an aspect of even our Torah reading this morning, biblical version of Passover, that I think still has a lot to do with us and with our experiences. So I'm sure, like some of you, last week, and maybe even more recently than last week, I had the games of the amazing NCAA basketball tournament on. Sometimes paying attention and seeing how my bracket was doing. Sometimes not paying such close attention unless I got an alert that there was an upset brewing. I will tell you that if Michigan wins their game today, I will change to my Michigan tie and I won't take it off until they actually lose, if they ever do. So since many of the games, certainly the marquee games, were on the CBS network, when the games ended, there appeared the regular programming. So my CBS watching is generally this tournament, 60 Minutes, and the Masters. But it seems that this network is also very heavily invested in so-called crime dramas. And after the last game had ended, one had started. I think it was part of the CSI franchise. I frankly did not even know that one of them was based in New Orleans. I had read about when production ramped back up for TV shows, that there was a challenge for writers as to whether to ignore, include, or focus on the reality of COVID and how strongly to do so. And all different kinds of choices were made. Some pretend that the virus does not exist in the world of its characters. After all, fictional TV is in part an escape. Some refer to COVID tangentially, but don't focus on it, and others make it a big part of the plot line of the season. So this CSI episode took this on, but did so from an interesting perspective, which is that the episode was filmed fairly recently when we knew more or less exactly what COVID is. But it did so with the characters living through the uncertain, mysterious, and frightful early days of the pandemic. As in when people were coming down with symptoms, when there was no effective treatment and vaccines were over a year away. It was, I have to say, creatively and effectively done, with trial and error included, lots of error, in fact, especially how long it took for mask wearing to become a regular and generally accepted preventative measure. And it reminded me, not without an increased heart rate and some anxiety, of what those early days felt like when we did not know how bad things would get, when we tried to hold on to hope and optimism, as we started to feel our way through the descending darkness, searching for the pathway out that we are hopefully at long last traveling together. So I share it because this experience of remembering what something was like as it was taking place, even when we are looking back on it from a distance and duration of some time, reminds me of a phrase in our Torah reading for Pesach. From the part of Parshat Bo that gives us the most detail, both about the first Passover and the Torah-based traditions that would help to guide us through all Passover observances since. It is amazing and should not be forgotten or overlooked that the Torah itself mentions matzah and maror specifically, and the requirement to tell the story and to tell it to our children. What did we sit down to last night? What will we sit down again to tonight, most of us? Exactly that. Expanded upon, of course, just as we have done for thousands of years. Part of the Seder is seeing ourselves as among those who were freed from Egypt, that very generation. It's easy to say, but it's not easy to do. We have to put ourselves in a mindset with which most of us are not at all familiar, to use our imaginations and access the historical and spiritual memories that are part of our background, makeup, legacy, and responsibility. These foundations of the Seder appear across multiple verses, and they are to some extent summarized and emphasized in the book of Exodus, chapter 8, verse 42. As I share this one verse, I'm going to leave a phrase untranslated. But I'm going to remind us that the setting is the moment that the Israelites are freed from centuries of bondage, a moment that we're called on to remember and to live in on Seder night. The verse states, that was for the Lord a Leil Shimurim, to bring them out of the land of Egypt. That same night is the Lord's, one of Shimurim, for all the children of Israel throughout the ages. And when the Torah repeats a word, it's a call to pay attention. And the repetition of this word, Shimurim, is no exception. I didn't look it up in my concordance, but it may be the only 2 times in the Torah that this exact word appears. But the root of the word is used many other times. And even if you don't recognize it immediately, you are probably familiar with it. The infinitive form of the verb lishmor, as in shamor v'zachor, as in shmura matzah, as in if you are a Ramah person, shmira, which was a kind of nighttime safety patrol. And also the phrase shomer Shabbat, same word. Its most used translation is to guard. But what does it mean that this was a night of guarding, a Leil Shimurim, a night of guarding for God, and a night of guarding for us for all time? Well, Hebrew is a rich language, and Leil Shimurim refers to a few different ways that our Passover observances include recalling and, in a way, reliving this night of Shimurim. It was a night of guarded anticipation and waiting. Our ancestors had waited a very long time for this night to arrive. As much as we have to imagine what it might have been like, what it might have felt like, the Israelites, for generation after generation after generation, looked forward to this moment as a future event, imagining what it would be like, what it would look like, what it would feel like. They, like we, were called on to think about what they would do with freedom from that which was enslaving them, to think about what kind of communities they would build, how they would use their freedom for good. That is a very Passover-centric message as we look back to the past, but also commit to using our freedom and our eventual even fuller freedom, which will include being together in person, to learn, build, grow, and of course, to help others. It was a night that was set aside, guarded, if you will, for multiple redemptions. Shimurim, after all, is a plural word. It is a redemption for God, as it were, because a promise made years earlier is being fulfilled now. And it is a set aside, reserved night for the Israelites, as the night of their redemption from Egypt. But this is Shimurim, and other redemptions are included as well. Additional saving moments happened on this night, including by tradition, even Daniel being saved from the lion's den. Our tradition, as you may know, teaches that future ultimate redemption will likely come on this very same night as well. So it was and is a night of multiple shimurim, many different ways that we have been guarded, that we've been noted, that we've been held close in God's attention, saved and rescued, redeemed in anticipation of yet to come redemption that we all have a part in bringing about. The idea that guarded means that we are safe or safer than usual on this night has also been understood as being implied in this verse. We are guarded on this night. Usually we would not ritually prescribe 4 cups of wine because it could have unintended negative effects. And I remind you that grape juice is perfectly acceptable on Seder nights as well. But since this night is guarded, we're confident that we can consume these cups and still focus on the meaning and message of the Seder. Did you know that in some communities, Jews would not lock their doors on Passover night? Not just so those who were hungry could come and eat, but get this, so there would be no delay in running to greet the Messiah, should this be the chosen night for its arrival. You can leave your door unlocked because it is a night of protection for all generations. It is a guarded night. Still, I don't necessarily recommend it. As others have taught, we should not rely on a miracle for protection. And we can unlock our doors pretty quickly these days, but the point of the practice and the extension of the idea of this being a Leil Shimurim, a night where even we are guarded, is a beautiful and it is a hopeful one. It's also a night of guarding ourselves from sleep, with the tradition of staying up late to discuss the details and meaning of the Exodus, and a late night of cleaning up after the Seder, so you don't have to do it all the next day. At least that's part of my experience. But it is also a night that is set aside, guarded, reserved, and dedicated to praise and to thank God for being the Redeemer of our people in ancient days and for inspiring us to commit to building a world where slavery, subjugation, and discrimination of all kinds will be things of the past. A night to know and affirm our faith that these efforts are blessed and will ultimately succeed with the help of God, for whom, like us, last night was also a Leil Shimurim. Chag Sameach. Turn now to special Musaf service for this first day of Pesach. It begins, as it usually does, with Chatzi Kaddish, which you can find on page 155.